Hey there, I'm Kat, and this is Brews and Reviews. In today's video, I'm going to be continuing with my David Gemmell project, and I'm going to be doing a review of Quest for Lost Heroes by David Gemmell. This review will be probably a lot shorter than my other David Gemmell reviews because I've found myself with slightly less to say upon this reread of this book. Even though I remember myself having quite a lot to say about it in the past, just on this reread I've had a little bit less to say. But let's talk about what I have got to say. So this book starts off with a raid on a village where all of the women have been abducted and taken away to be sold as slaves. And we follow a character called Kiel as he goes to petition his lord to try and get the women back because he's like, I fancy this girl and I really would like to have her back. So can we go and get her? And the lord says no. And without going into too much detail on the hows and whys, he ends up enlisting the legendary heroes of Belazar. These are a group of older warriors who survived something that they never should have survived, realistically, logically never should have survived, because they were far outnumbered and fate decided that it was not their time yet. So we follow this group on their way to reclaim the woman that Kiel is trying to track down. And there is some really interesting nods to characters and lineages from previous Draenei books that make an appearance throughout this. So now that the summary of this book is out of the way, without giving any spoilers to what actually happens, I want to talk to you guys about the thoughts and feelings I had throughout this book. So first off, I think there's some really interesting discussion to be had about how Kiel interacts with and meets the heroes of Belazar, because they are old men, they are retired, and I think it's really interesting that throughout the story you have this change of perspective from Kiel, who has experienced them as legend and has sort of built them up in his head, and then he's like, oh, this guy's actually just really dirty and smelly and kind of gross, and this guy's really grumpy, and like, these aren't like I expected them to be, because they are in fact just men. They aren't quite what legend has built them up to be. And I just think that's a really interesting point, because a lot of the heroes in David Gemmell's books do get built up. They are this legendary character and they have so many amazing stories about them. I wonder, after reading a lot of David Gemmell's books, if people sort of do the same thing and like idolize the heroes, but when you actually look into the nitty-gritty of the books themselves, you realize that maybe they weren't as perfect as it seems. And I think a really interesting discussion on that is the First Chronicles of Dross the Legend, where you get to see how he became a legend. We're not talking about that today, we're talking about Quest for Lost Heroes. So I just think it's really nice to see the change in perspective that Kiel goes through, and the way that he sort of grows up in his understanding that not everything is as it seems. It's really good to see that Kiel does grow up, because at the beginning of the book he does appear as kind of a nice guy. He really is attracted to Ravenna, but he hasn't really identified that she's a human being. He really likes her because she's really pretty, and he hasn't discovered that women are humans yet. And I think it's really interesting that at one point McGrig has to say, no, but why do you like her? Is it, you know, because of her brain? Does she have thoughts that bounce around in there? Or, you know, and Kiel realizes that he's chasing after Ravenna because of something that he made up in his head, rather than an actual real connection between them. But he continues on with the quest because he's sworn to go and get her. And it's a nice development because we get to see Kiel interact with another woman, and he treats her very differently because of that. It's also really interesting that this really small quest, where a group of heroes are trying to track down this one girl, turns into something so much bigger than that, as the lineages of the Earl of Bronze and Ulrich come face to face once again in a slightly different way. We're not having a big battle about this. This book is not about big battles, and I really appreciated it for that, because while there are fights and things that happen in this book, it's far more close-knit and it feels a little bit more personal because of that. Sorry if the framing's changed, my memory card ran out of space. So back to it. So one of the major characters, Charius, who is kind of the leader of the heroes of Belazar, is working for the lord that Kiel goes to petition to go and rescue Ravenna at the beginning of the book. And he's not exactly on good terms with this lord. And I think it's really great that from the start of this book, it's kind of establishing that one of the themes that is prevalent throughout is that entitled rich people ruin lives. Because there are a lot of rich people in this book that are doing bad things just for wealth. And you know, it's really fun for me when that doesn't go well. I don't know if anyone else just really enjoys when bad things happen to rich people who are just trying to screw everyone else over so that they can get more money. And I'm not saying which characters get their comeuppance, but there are quite a few characters in this book that are just rich and mean and I like it when it goes wrong for them. Unfortunately, it doesn't go wrong for all of them, but for some of them, it does. Now I'd like to take a moment to talk about my favourite characters in this book, and that is Finn and McGrig. Finn is kind of this grumpy guy that hates people and just wants to live in the forest in peace and just be self-sufficient and never speak to another human being again. And McGrig is his sunshine. Grumpy, sunshine, yes. I just love them. They are like the perfect pairing, and they just make my heart really happy, and anyone who reads this book and says that they're not gay is not reading this book with their brain, because they are just the grumpy sunshine gay uncles that live in the forest and make me happy, and I will take no questions on that. Now, I haven't really mentioned anything about the Nadia side of the story, and it is a really big part of this story, as when Ravenna is sold into slavery, she is taken to the Nadia. She's taken by Nadia slavers to be sold, and like slavery is a big theme in this one. I really enjoyed the discussion between the women who had sort of been taken by the slavers, and they had this discussion about like, are you a virgin? No. Well, say that you are anyway. Men can't tell. They'll leave you alone. Because money, they like money. And the reason I like that conversation so much is because of the opposite conversation that's happening at the same time, with Kiel being like, of course Ravenna would be pure. She never would have had sex with someone. When she's like, yeah, I definitely did. And it just made me laugh a lot because Kyle's so naive. I mean, he does grow out of it a little bit. He becomes more of a well-rounded person throughout as Charius begins to train him throughout this book, and he meets more people and has more experiences. I think you can't really blame him for his attitude and naivety, but it's nice to see him grow out of it. Anyway, in this book we do actually get to meet some of Tanaka Khan's children. Tanaka Khan was the protagonist of The King Beyond the Gate, and if you haven't read that book, then you really should. And you shouldn't listen to anything else that I say about this book. So the two major children that you meet in this book are Jungir Khan, who is taken over as like leader of the Nadia, and Tanaki Khan, who is Tanaka Khan's only daughter. And she's kind of like an insurance policy. They don't really want to keep her around, but they keep her around just in case because there's no Nadia heir at this point in time. And they're like, can't be risking it with Tanaka Khan's bloodline. We'll just keep a lady around just in case. She has some really hard times in this book, and it's really quite difficult to read about. There's a lot of violence that is perpetrated against Tanaki in this book, including sexual assault and just other violences. It's really unpleasant to read about, so I mean, like, caution anyone who is deciding to read this book that is present, obviously along with the slavery, and there's other like non-consensual things, but quite obviously on page there is like an assault, and it's not pleasant to read about. There are some really just nasty characters in that section, so you know, you should just be aware of that before going into the book. There is a section in this book where the characters travel through a portal into another world, which is something that we haven't really seen in like the main Draenei books. They sort of stay within the one world, but this one involves going through a portal and sort of collecting another character that the main characters knew. And I think that's a really nice nod to like the prequel books, Morningstar and Knights of Dark Renown. There are kind of portals and sort of different parallel worlds, which are really interesting to learn about. I'm really trying not to spoil anything, which is why I think I'm being a little bit more vague than I want to be, but I think it's nice to have that little bit of a nod back again. I think all of my other thoughts are rather spoilery. I will just say at the end of this book there is a plot line that sort of gets uncovered, and it's not really a twist, but it like kind of is a twist, and it's really interesting. I really like the particular characters that it involves. There is a particularly cute moment between a character from the past and current characters from this book that I really enjoyed, and you know what? It's just a really good book. And this is the David Gemmell book that had the most serious potential for a sequel that we never got, and I will forever be sad, as I think most David Gemmell fans are, that this book never had a continuation. It sets it up so perfectly for a future war, and unfortunately we never got to see what that war would turn out like, and I just think it would have been such a cool thing to see, but forever in our dreams, I suppose. And while it sucks that we'll never get to see what that story is, because unfortunately David Gemmell has passed away, a small part of me really enjoys the knowledge that there are other stories in the Draenei world that we'll just never know, because it just means that we can keep dreaming about it and wondering what else could happen in the Draenei world. It gives my brain potential, and I enjoy that. So I am still sad that this book will never get a sequel, but at the same time I really enjoy what we did get. So I hope you enjoyed this review. I'm sorry if it has been a little bit garbled. It has been a little bit longer than I normally leave it between reading the book and filming this, so my brain has gone a bit. But I think I remembered most of the things that I wanted to say. So if you did enjoy this video, please leave a like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!